Immigration. Let's talk about immigration. A recent study has come out that of the G7, Canada has had the most immigration across the board, and actually two-thirds of our growth, two-thirds of our GDP growth comes from immigration, which shows you how important immigration is to this country. Because if we weren't bringing in that immigration as much as we are, our GDP may not be growing.
Well, there's a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to immigration. So we're talking about hitting numbers of 500,000 people coming in. And that isn't, by the way, those numbers do not include the international students that are flooding in, which is another 250,000, I think is the number. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood, which say there's a lot of people churning in here. Something I point to, shine a light on, which goes back to the inflation conversation, JG, which is, when you look at that many people flooding into the country on a small country like Canada, it makes a big difference economically on a couple of fronts. Number one, is that they're coming in and they're setting up house. So when we talk about inflation, they're still driving demand. Our government and our Bank of Canada, but we'll talk about our government. Bank of Canada is trying to fight inflation. They're flooding they're flooding immigration into the country, who are then setting up house, who are spending money, and there's big demand. And so you have to consider that as part of the other reason that inflation is going to be hard to keep in check in Canada. That's just a small part of it, but we can't ignore it. The next thing about immigration is that we talk about, it's basically a 1-to-1 ratio, is that, for every job, there's one job out there that's a vacancy that isn't being filled. So at the end of the day, we have this labor challenge, this labor shortage in general right across the country, and immigration, we're hoping, is going to come in to fill those spots. We're bringing apparently skilled labor in, which is very beneficial. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is fill that vacancies. But that's inconsistent with what Macklem said, Tiff Macklem, with our Governor, Bank of Canada, who said, one thing that we may need to consider is, as we increase rates and slow the economy down, guess what? Unemployment's going to tick up. So it's like, okay, how does this all work? Like, how does that even make sense? And, does Freeland and Macklem, do they really get together and have a conversation about employment and interest rates? I don't know. It's just so bizarre that they're having that kind of a conversation, because it's just inconsistent.
Wouldn't you love to know, though, Patrick? Wouldn't you love to be in on that room?
Yeah, I'd love to go on a rant with Freeland, but I wouldn't do any good. Okay.
The one thing, though, about this, I'm looking at the chart that I find surprising, is that Japan is down in immigration. Okay, so they're negative immigration. That's not surprising, because we know Japan's, Japan. But Italy and Germany is also negative immigration. I was a little bit surprised by that, specifically Germany, not so much Italy, but I was very surprised by Germany being in negative immigration territory. I'm not sure if this means people are just favoring Canada. I'm not sure if they're just put the brakes on bringing in immigration, but I am surprised by it.
Well, we don't talk about it enough. We shine a light on it, but when we talk about what's happening in the macroeconomic, the geopolitical, what's happening in Germany, what's happening in Italy, what's happening in the UK, in Europe overall. I mean, if I'm in Germany and the lights are going to be off this winter and I'm going to freeze in the dark, I'm getting the hell out of Germany. It's no different. There's a cost of living, there's a quality of life that I think you're seeing people just leave those countries given what's happening and what's going on. I think there's a lot of fear, and if there's an opportunity to get out of the country, they're going to do that. And quite frankly, I don't know if I blame them when you start to get into the details of what economically they can look like this winter. I mean, gosh, they're cutting down trees because they're afraid they're not going to be able to heat their homes. And as much as natural gas prices have come down, it just as quickly can spike again. So there's a lot of just, crazy things happening on the other side of the pond, if you will. And so I'm not actually surprised by that number. I would go, yeah, I can see why they would get the heck out of Dodge.
Yeah, interesting. This chart actually projects the population from 2022 to 2032. So it's more than, what I'm saying is this chart indicates more than just what's happening right now with the geopolitics of today's situation. So anyways, interesting and fascinating, but as a real estate investor, population is very, very, very important to us. It's a great thing that Canada is such a great country and that a lot of people want to come to Canada, and that we've opened up our borders to allow that immigration to come in. I think it's all good from that perspective.
It's very controversial. You know, at the end of the day, JG, it's very controversial. You know, a lot of people have different views of it, but we look at it from an economic perspective as, you know, as kind of capitalists and entrepreneurs. You know, we look at what drives an economy, and I think it's really important to have that immigration. And I guess it could be a big debate what's happening on the other side of your pond, and the pond, like we talk about Germany or Italy or some of those others. It's complicated. You know, I may simplify it for myself to understand and make it make sense, but it is a very, very complicated, and there's a lot of factors that are affecting economy. So that's all to say that there's a lot going on, and people are doing what people need to do. And just on an immigration point of view, there's the interprovincial migration. We can't step over the fact about Ontario from an interprovincial migration, how many people are leaving Ontario. You still have a net positive growth. A lot of people are leaving Ontario because
that's because the immigrants land here, most of them, and then move on.
And
so you can't. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, you know, housing is more expensive in Ontario, but not all parts of Ontario. I mean, listen, you know, if you want cheaper housing, just move to Sudbury, Ontario, move to Sault Ste. Marie, move to Timmins. You know,
which is fine as long as there's jobs there, 100%.
Lots of jobs there. Immigration complete. Ooh, hit the camera again. Very good. I'm getting good at this.